All right, well, thanks everybody for joining us. This is going to be a great presentation. I know it already. Plus, I saw your presentations at Jim Joy, Jamie. So today we have with us Jamie Whalen. Jamie's history in rowing and sculling is extensive, and he brings a wealth of knowledge. And I think it goes perfectly hand in hand with the ADM. Much of the ADM revolves around a healthier aspect, whether it be beginning rowing or continuing rowing or lifelong rowing. And I think sculling is a major part of that, especially for the young people. And as they grow and their bodies develop, sculling is better suited to them. It's better for speed and for boat moving abilities. In 1999, Jamie, I don't know if I ever told you a story. I went to Italy and backpacked, one of those I've got to find myself trips. And so I would sit every day in the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, and I'd watch the little Italian kids come out of the wall, and they would go up and down the Arno, and then they play soccer and they do all these things. And so I said, you know what? It was a pivotal moment. And I said, when I get home, I'm buying sculling equipment. And we had a massive middle school program at the time. So I remember calling Jim Deese, and I said, Jim, I'm really intimidated. Like I want to start sculling with all the kids, and I think it's important that they learn how to scull, and there'll be, all these things. And I said, but I'm just so scared. I don't know what I'm going to do. And there was this long, awkward pause on the phone. And he goes, okay, are you ready? I'm going to give you the secret. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking, man, I'm so excited. Let me know what the secret is. And he goes, are you sure? And I said, yeah. And he goes, it's legs, back, arms, you dummy. You just get two handles. And I was like, I felt like the biggest fool because I'd been so intimidated about starting sculling for a rowing team, for a sweep rowing team. And I'll never forget how much of a dummy I felt like in that moment. And I think there are a lot of people who feel that way. I since then I've come across a lot of people who just, we're not a nation of scullers to begin with. And I think there's an intimidation factor. So that's my lead into you. I think this is really an exciting talk. And I think it fits right into ADM for lifelong rowing. The reality is, if you can teach somebody to row single, they can row the rest of their lives. They don't need anybody else. So that's where you come in, my friend. So welcome. Thank you for doing this, and pretty excited to hear this. Everybody, if you have a question, put it in the chat. I'll monitor the chat for Jamie, and then let him know when you have something that comes up. Jamie, take it away. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending this presentation. It's wonderful to see so much interest in junior sculling. I hope all of you are safe and well and make it through the latest COVID outbreak in good health. I look forward to seeing you all in person in 2022. I think many of you are here because of the recent success of the Y-Quad Cities Juniors program. It's been a great run the last 10 years. We've got a 7-year streak going in the junior women's quad at Youth Nationals. Had eight wins recently in the last 10 years at Heather Charles in the youth doubles. Then the big one, the gold in the junior women's double in 2016 at the Mega Worlds in Rotterdam, and then at Henley in 2018 in the Diamond Jubilee. The main reason for this success is clear. Peter Sherris took over the program in 2010, and he's terrific at training. He's passionate about training, and no one coaches the physical side of our sport, especially at the junior level, as well as Peter. It's been remarkable to see firsthand the progress that his athletes make when following his training plan. He's speaking tomorrow, and I highly recommend all of you see that. Besides Peter's passion for training, we also have had over the years some really great athletes, talented athletes with supportive parents, and it really starts with the athletes, their dedication. And we're a club that mostly rows twice a day, so it's a big sacrifice on their part and the family's part to participate in the program. Also, the Y-Quad Cities is blessed with a beautiful 4-bay boathouse that got built in 2000 that's managed by the local YMCA. It gives the space for winter training at a central location, and that's been really valuable over the years. And just outside the boathouse is a great body of water for training with small boats. You can go about 2,000 meters if you turn left into something we call the slough, protected body of water, when the weather is not so great. And if you go to the right, you can go for, we go for many miles, but at least 3 miles behind a breakwater that separates the main channel of the Mississippi from where we row. And we have the, on calm days, we can run 8 boats across, which is amazing when you've got sculling boats. So they can row side by side in doubles and singles and quads and line up, or we can stagger them based on what we expect their speed to be. And that's a real advantage in the summertime. But today I'd like to talk about something else which I think really helps us, and that's our emphasis on basic sculling skills. We don't coach to an ideal, as it were, where we have a poster on the wall, that's how it's done. Everyone try to do it exactly that way. We spend a lot of time teaching these basic sculling skills throughout the course of the year, starting in the spring with a spring trip down to Florida, and then throughout the year, even as we're getting ready for major regattas. So we do the skills in part because we've just found that the learning of the skills is challenging and fun, is a nice balance to all the training on ergs and indoor training that we do. Making the kids comfortable in the boats is key. The better they are at rowing the boats, they'll be safer, and it's a big confidence booster when they can do these drills. We find that when we do the drills, it promotes sort of the group, that it's a positive group dynamic that we're working towards. Sculling is such a solitary activity in the single, but for young athletes, they really want to be part of a group. And so having these drills and having the skills helps with that. The question for the skills, and the question I always have, is, do these skills make the boats go faster? Is it worth your while to spend time on backing properly, or spinning the boat properly, or any of these other basic skills? And I would like to think so, but that's always a question. So our year starts, Peter has this great winter training program, and then he brings the top athletes down to a camp that I run in Florida in March. The camp takes place in Indian Harbor Beach on the East Coast, and we spend 5 days together. Most of the rowing is long, easy, steady state rowing. I try to get the kids some opportunity to paddle in kayaks and canoes. The place where we go is exceptional because it's where the Canadian national sprint canoe and kayak team often train. So we get to see how they do things, and maybe play in boats that are similar to theirs. There's some swimming in the beach, and in the ocean at the beach, and then back to the rowing, and we'll do lots of drills. And the drills that we're doing, I've broken up here for you into 3 groups: those for boat handling, those for blade work, and those for communication. Again, we're doing these drills not so much to row in a certain style, a racing style, but to promote small boat skills. So for boat handling, the focus is on comfort in the boat. Can you feel at ease and relaxed, that not just so tense, especially when you're getting to racing singles for the first time after a long layoff? Can you be safe on the water? Are you aware of what the hazards are on any given body of water? It's a good opportunity to remind athletes that the rowing is about more than just numbers on an erg monitor or speed coach. The winter training is, again, often on the ergometers, and C2 and Row Perfect are what we use. And we're rowing for splits, and so there's a lot of looking at screens. And when you get back on the water, playfulness and awareness of surroundings are key. The drills I'm going to show you start on a lot of it's left up to the athlete to figure things out. So for the coaching side of things, patience is a virtue. You let them do the drills and maybe fail a few times before they finally get it. For blade work, the biggest difference between erging and sculling is rowing with two handles rather than one, and the linear motion that goes with rowing with that one handle. So the drills in blade work are to get the arms moving in the arcs around the pins, and the athletes will have gotten stronger, and they'll want to pull hard at some point, and you've got to try and give them the chance to catch with confidence, or else they'll be a little unnerved the first time they start pulling hard. Understanding the crossover and how the oarlocks work are something that I spend time on, and all of this ultimately comes down to a proper grip, relaxed arms, and loose shoulders. We also do drills for communication, where it's the verbal or non-verbal connection with others inside and outside the boat. We need to work on these sorts of skills because there are no coxswains in the boats that we row, and they've turned out to be particularly valuable when things don't go as planned. So the first drill that I'd like to show you or talk about is a really simple drill. It's where athletes just sit in the boats without holding onto the handles. You can do this drill just off the dock or in a quiet cove someplace. You need to have flat water to do it. The athletes sit in the boat with the legs down, blades feathered, handles overlapping slightly, maybe a centimeter or two. Start with left hand handle over the right, and the athletes will probably have their hands down the grips a little bit to make this work, and then slowly lift the hands off the handles. If they lean a little bit to starboard, the handles will stay pressed together. If they lean to port, they'll start coming apart. So get them first a little bit of confidence this way, and then switch the handles so they're port over starboard, and they'll feel that the boat is not level anymore. That's a good thing if they can feel that. If they don't feel that difference, then you've got something to work on. And then as they get confidence, see if they can raise their hands off the handles of the oars and put them on their legs, or raise them up overhead. Once they get this and they're playing with it and they can sit in the boat and the boat's level, you can try it with the blade squared. There's less buoyancy, so more tendency to tip over. And then you can try it again with blade squared and the right handle on top of the left. Again, it's really great for these athletes to try and feel when the boats are level. It should feel level if you've got standard rigging numbers. We're always going with like 1 degree or 1.5 degrees of 1.5 centimeters of left over right. So that's what gives this feeling of the boat being level. If you got more than that, then it's not such a great drill. And this business about the boat being level, one of the differences I think between sculling and sweep is that sweep boats, they can be down to either side, and sculling boats are almost invariably down to port because of the way the left over right works and the rigging and all that. So we're always trying to get the boats level. If the boats are level in sculling, the other thing that happens is that the starboard oars are generally deeper than the port oars. And that's because athletes are trying to row with one hand directly over the other. The second drill is another simple drill where you can do it off the dock if you have a big enough body of water in front of the dock and you don't have much traffic, and that's just rowing big circles one oar at a time. And arms only in the beginning, then full slide as the confidence grows and the ability to balance the boat goes. Keep the inside oars feathered and off the water. And it's easiest to do it counterclockwise first, again, because of the left over right. And then have them try and do it clockwise. Rowing whole circles is how I usually do it. And it's really interesting to see if the athletes are stronger in particular on one side or are more coordinated on one side. Again, generally the counterclockwise is easier, but once they get it, they should be able to row both directions well. I've had athletes that I've done this with later who have great experience rowing and racing and being successful, and they couldn't go back clockwise. And it was really interesting to see them struggle with that. It's a pretty simple drill, but it can be challenging as well. The boat handling 3 is just full of all the things that we do to practice maneuvering, the basic waterwomanship or watermanship. Some of these things are not practiced at all anymore. In the first one, mostly people stop boats just by snow plowing, but there are faster ways to stop the boat. You can either lift the handle straight up and bury the blades with the blades in the slightly in the normal recovery position, or you can tip the tops of the blades a little farther over. So effectively what you're doing is catching crabs on both sides and stopping the boat. Much more effective. So I like to show them all 3 ways to stop the boat. I also like to show them how to spin the boat with full slide and encourage them to do that while trying to keep the boat as level as possible. And then putting those 2 together is rowing hard, stopping the boat hard with one side and going right into spinning the boat and getting back going the other direction. And then we do a lot of backing, starting with both blades squared and then tipping the blades upside down to recover, skimming them along the surface of the water, and then turning the blades backwards and holding that skimming position on the recovery as well so we don't catch crabs, doing that full slide, doing the right sequence of motion. So it's leg, back, arms, back, legs, and everything. If you reversed if you were filming it and rewound it, it would look like they're rowing. We do that, we compete sometimes that way, have a lot of backing games where they back and race each other, and then go into backing one blade squared, one blade turned backwards, see if they can still go straight when they're backing. And then just for an extra challenge, row with both blades turned backwards, and then rowing with one blade squared and one blade turned backwards. And again, trying to hold the hull level and move the boat straight. Those are the skills that I'm really looking forward for in these drills. The 4th boat handling drill is rowing 10 strokes for distance. This is full slide from rest with any rating they want. It's best done as a competition between boats. The only rule is that there can't be any stopping on the recovery. It's a drill that I often use for showing to try and row how rowing the longest distance between strokes is a good thing, and sort of exploring the relationship between rating and boat speed and distance. It's also a great drill, however, for working on keeping the hull level and for going straight, and the effect of rowing a little bit longer on one side or the other. I'd like to say that this drill, the next one, rowing lying down, has great technical value. I'd like to say that it helps make boats go fast. I can't say that, but I include it because the athletes really love doing it. They first like laying down the boat. You guys probably all experienced that, and do it whenever they get a chance to. Later, it becomes a great way to learn how to stretch your back out after long training sessions. But we started doing it sort of as a competition where lying down the boat rowing. It first started with legs, feet in the water, and with traditionally rigged boats with pull stays and with wing riggers. You can put your feet on those parts of the boat and push against them and row that way. This is all much harder to do with bow mount wings, but it's still, they still seem to have fun doing it. So I put it on here. Rowing standing up is something that is probably the most nerve-wracking of these drills, and it's not for everyone, but if you most people can do it. It first starts with learning how to stand up in the boat. helps to know how to do that in general so that you can get in and out of your boat without needing the dock when you're launching or coming back in. One thing that you can use to help yourself is to butt the ends of the handles together and then use that as something to pull against to help yourself stand up. When you are standing up and you start feeling confident about standing up, then you can start taking baby strokes. It reinforces having the blade squared at the catch before pulling. And if you're doing it, it's best to do it on warm days and be ready for practice for reentry from the water. It can also be done in connection with the standing shove, which again, the athletes really love doing that. It's a great move when launching, especially in a single. Henley was a big event. Whoops. Henley was a big event for us. We had gone over in 2015 and come up a little bit short. And on Saturday against the eventual winner, Gloucester, Hartpury. And it was one of these moments that was really sad because you never know when you might get another chance to go back over, especially in a category that requires everyone to be from the same school or club, especially a small club like ours. When would we have 4 athletes like the ones we had in 2015? But in 2018, we had 3 more athletes and one who had been in that 2015 boat, and they ended up being successful. In large credit due to Caroline Shearers, who's the stroke, and with her experience, the others caught on how to do things. Especially valuable was Caroline's skills in communication. They didn't need a Cox because they had Caroline. A couple things that happened during the race, though, where it directly involved these skills, these rowing skills, was at the start of the final. The Emma Mask, our 2-seat, lost her oar with about 3 strokes in, and things could have been really bad, but she was able to grab it and get back rowing again. Caroline sensed that, and they all were right on the beat again and lost only about a half a length. Also in the semifinal, steering is always an issue on Saturday at Henley, and our competition was a very well drilled quad from Latimer Upper, and in the end they had problem steering, and our boat didn't have such a problem steering. Large credit due to our bow, Delaney Evans. So our next set of drills are the blade work drills, rowing wide grip. Hands are far enough down the handles so that the hands don't touch each other at the crossover. Most overlap is set at 16 to 20 centimeters, so that's about the distance that you should have your hands down the shafts of the oar or the handles. It's a good drill for seeing how the crossover works, keep getting the hands on the way so that you can have the handles tight together. But it's also a good drill for rowing around the collar, rowing around the pins after a lot of berging. So you get the motion of the hands separating, coming together and separating. With the hands farther down, it's a little easier to coach the relaxed grip, with what I'd like to call the proper grip, where you have a firm but relaxed grip on the oars, and to row around the pins, you encourage the athletes to push out a little bit to maintain that contact between the collars and the oar locks. Second blade work drill is rowing a quarter feather. This is sometimes called the Italian feather. It used to be called the Italian feather. It's almost square blade rowing. It requires firming of the wrists at the release for the blades to come out. The slight break off the square makes it a little easier for them to come out. And then balancing the oars on the bottom corner of the sleeves during the recovery, closer to the square than full feather. With a little bit of out pressure, the friction between the oar locks or the collars is enough to maintain the slight feather. When you do that and you push out a little bit, there's no need to squeeze the handles tightly. Third blade work drill is the rowing the right hand over the left hand. For this, it's best to set the oarlocks level. Nowadays, that's a lot easier because of the snap washers. This is a good drill for working on the crossover. It's also a good drill for learning controlling the roll of the boat and down to starboard, down to port, alternating that. So you can alternate left over right with the right over left every 4 strokes or so. And you can roll the boat down to one side or the other to get the clearance of the crossover. If you roll it about 1 degree, that equals about 1 centimeter in the oarlocks, so you don't have to roll it too much. The other way of doing it is to keep the hull level and row one hand in front of the other. Level locks with the hull one hand in front of the other was a very traditional way of rowing in England, and I think some coastal rowers, and it used to be open water rowers, used to rig level locks as well, because of rowing in rough conditions. They didn't know which side they would really be down on. We also row the blades half buried. It turns out with the rates that we're rowing these days, and with the equipment, the thin blades and the skinny shafts, it's hard to just unweight the handles at the catch and let the blades drop in and find their depth. That's what we used to do. It's hard to do that now. You have to control the depth of the blade, and it's easiest to practice that by rowing like this half buried and then move towards full buried. When you control them half buried, it'll feel like you're pulling the handles right towards the knees. You row it so shallow that you can still row without washing out. That's the goal. Still have something to pull against. I think there's some argument still for rowing with Macon blades, where the load is a little bit lighter at the catch, and then it gradually increases during the drive. This summer was interesting because we got to see a very talented Swiss sculler, Aurelia Maxima Janssen from Switzerland, win the Junior Worlds and then finish, I think it was second at U23s, rowing with Macon blades at a very slow stroke rate. So it'll be interesting to see if she keeps that up or if other people adopt that. I think for training purposes, rowing blades half buried is very similar to rowing Macon blades, where you have to, well, first have the hull level to catch at the same time. And also when you are catching, there's this moment where you are feeling for the water until you finally make the catch complete, as it were. The big blades and the way we drive them into the water sort of takes that art out of it, but you can practice it with half blades. This can morph into a fun exercise. I'll call it splash catch or splash finish. Sometimes I'll have athletes back the blades in and splash the athletes in front of and behind them, or wash out and splash the athletes in the stern, just because they've been getting splashed by them or something like that. It goes along with the half blade buried, and if you have warm conditions and clean water, and it's sort of a moment that needs to be a little bit lighter, you can have them do that. The fifth blade work drill is the Scullers catch. I came across this in Frank Cunningham's book, The Sculler Ease, which I recommend if you can find a copy. I don't think it's in print anymore, but if you do find a copy, it's well worth acquiring it. Frank talked about this book, about this catch as something that professional scullers used to do. It's basically catching from a full feather without lifting the blades any higher off the water. Some people think, oh, it's like a flip catch, but actually you've got to do it without lifting the blades any higher. And you open and close your hands to square and feather the blades. It's a good drill to practice in rough conditions, good drill to practice in headwind conditions. It's a good way to practice starts. Sometimes the boats are down to one side, and athletes have to be able to pull the blade into square, as it were. The last blade work drill is the slap catch, and this one I saw in 2017 in Sarasota at the World Championships. Really well-known coach Johnny Castiglione was coaching the Lithuanian men's quad that year and won the gold medal. And during a practice, I saw them do this drill where they rowed 4 strokes, and then on the 4th stroke, let the blades fall, or I think they actually slapped the water with them, lifted up their hands, and then no pressure drive. So every 4 strokes, slap the water, every 4 strokes, slap the water. It's a great drill for getting the timing between all 4 rowers and 8 blades. These are pictures from the Sculling with Dolphins camp that I run with the Quad City athletes from 2019 to last year to 2021. The middle one on the bottom was 2020. We were all set to go when COVID started becoming a real concern for everyone, and so we shut the camp down before it ever got going, really. And then last year, with one with everyone with the masks on, was a really big year for us, or a big camp for us. They had been rowing singles, and you think, well, Quad Cities, they already row singles, so it's easier for them with COVID. But it turns out that our athletes really missed rowing in team boats. We were able to have some athletes rowing team boats who were siblings, but others had a lot to spend all their time in singles, and they really missed rowing in the doubles and the quad. And that was sort of eye-opening for me. I figured, oh, they really love the single, and they can do it. But it turns out for a full year, it wasn't as attractive. The last set of drills are drills designed to help with communication between athletes. And again, these can be verbal or nonverbal. The first one is rowing in formation. I like to have the athletes row single file as close together as possible at steady state. And by close together, something like 3 or 6 feet, a safe distance as far as the equipment goes, but someplace where they have to really pay attention the whole time. It's important that they learn how to steer and navigate in the line, as it were. And I asked them to match stroke rate and speed. So to help with the speed, they might have to go to 3/4 slide or half slide to keep the line together. And then this can all morph into last boat up, where the last boat will row around the others and then rejoin the line at the front, and keep doing that. So it's a little bit of interval training. And then it can be turned into a game where you have 2 lines of boats rowing last boat up, with the passing taking place on the outside. And the game is to see how many passes can be done in a certain distance or in a certain time. The athletes quickly learn that the slower the train or the line of boats, the more passes they can make. So they'll try to row as slowly as possible. And so then the rule is that you can't stop entirely rowing. You have to keep the boats moving at some speed for it to work. The second communication drill is rowing a double as a pair or a quad as a 4. I used to do this. When I first started doing this, I would take the oars away from the athletes. They still row with just one hand. They don't grab it like a sweep oar. But now I just have them row with 1 blade square and 1 blade feathered. That gives them a chance to row and switch the sides that they row on while they're rowing. And so we go from in a double as a pair, we go from port stroke to starboard stroke, back and forth. And in the quad, we go from port stroke to starboard stroke, back and forth, and when we do bucket rig, and leave it up to the athletes when they make the changes. That's where the communication comes into play. There's always some messing up that takes place, but again, it's up to them to figure things out, and they usually have a fun time with this drill. This is the other drill that I have a hard time justifying in terms of making boats go faster. Call it bury the riggers, done in a double or quad, and it's rolling the hull so far on the recovery that the riggers touch the water, the oarlocks touch the water, and try and do it without capsizing. There's usually lots of screams from the boat as this is happening of delight or nervousness. And the one justification I can make for it is that they can learn how to roll the boat to starboard. Again, the sculling boats are down to port so often that getting them to do anything towards starboard is a good thing. But I can also justify it in terms of communication, that it only takes place if it only works if all four in the quad or both rowers in the double are committed to it. And so there has to be some communication between the athletes and saying, yes, this is what we're doing, and now we're doing it now. And again, that's without a coxswain. So it's something that has to work on. It works better in some crews than others. And it's a challenge in the quad because, again, the stroke seat and the bow seat are pretty far away from each other. So the communication has to run through 2-seat and 3-seat to get between the two of them. The fourth communication drill is rowing the triple. So triples used to be popular boats in the 1800s, 3 scullers. They fell out of favor for some reason and were replaced with the quad. Every now and then you'll see one that was a cox pair that was converted into a triple. Sort of makes sense to me because it's easier to communicate between bow and stroke. We do it in the quad by having 3 athletes row and the other one sit out. The one sitting out can't sit out completely. They have to row air strokes with the blades feathered, but no one's setting the boat. And it's fun to do and switch rowers in and out regularly. And again, it's up to the athletes to do that switching. Again, there's no coxswain to make the call. The fifth communication drill is rowing combinations of the drills that we've just gone through. And a favorite one is wide grip quarter feather, starting with wide grip and then adding quarter feather as we go along. But you can keep adding drills. So you can add any number of other ones, wide grip, quarter feather, half blade rowing, one blade squared, one blade feathered, feet out, would be a challenge. And again, you're looking for the athletes to be able to keep the hull level and row the boat straight. Everything's easier when you can do those 2 things. And lastly, starts with no hands. And this is similar to the very first drill where the athletes are sitting at rest with the hands on the legs. Blades can be feathered or square and buried, a little bit more nerve-wracking square and buried, and handles just slightly overlapping, but in this case towards the stern rather than towards the bow. It's a really good drill for helping the athletes learn how to follow stroke, that the boat won't go anywhere if you don't follow stroke. And it's a drill where if they can do it, then regular starts seem a lot easier, and they have to, it doesn't always go well, so it helps them prepare for the unexpected. I don't know if this drill or the wide grip drill helped Emma Mask at Henley in 2018 in particular. She still may have been able to grab the oar and keep going, but I'd like to think that it had something to do with it, that she had more confidence and had already done something like this previously. So those are the drills that we do in Florida. We will come back to those drills. Peter will do some of them in the Quad Cities, and then when I come, we'll maybe do a few more. We do them throughout the racing season. We add some drills maybe to help if we decided on a particular technique for a crew. And sometimes we do them because just to break up the training. They can, the training is long to really build the fitness and the endurance and the speed. And so to have a few things that you can go back to, something that you've done in Florida when you were swimming in the ocean and paddling kayaks and being in the sun with the dolphins, the manatees, and the diving pelicans, it's a good thing. So that's another reason for the skills is just that association with some pleasurable time. And I think it ties in well with ADM at all levels. So we've been doing them at the sort of level stage 3 and stage 4. They seem like drills that mostly could be done at even stage 1 or stage 2, and certainly for adults in stage 5. All about comfort, safety, and confidence in the boat. And do they make the boat go faster? Again, I'd like to think so, but maybe it's all of Peter's training plan. So I'm fully aware of that. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions about the drills or anything else concerned with Junior Scully, please don't hesitate to write or call. I'd be happy to chat more. And again, I look forward to seeing you all in person again sometime during the regatta season this year. Thanks.
Hey, Jamie, there's a couple questions here we can have a peek at. First one is, we are currently a sweep program, but looking to do more sculling in the future. Do you have any advice on teaching novices to scull? And obviously all of this is there, but if you were to take over a sweep program, where and how would you start? What would you look for?
Can we ask the person who's asking the question, where in the country are they located? Not specifically, but are they in the north or south or something like that? Or what time of year are they doing this?
I'll leave that up to them. Right now, they're anonymous, so I'll let them put that in. We get that answer from them.
Okay. For a sweep program, one of the easiest things to do is to get maybe quad 4 convertible boats so that they don't have a huge extra investment in equipment, and buy the sculling oars and do it in sort of Cox quads. Ultimately, if they want to transition to, and that way you're not spending a lot of extra money on sculling equipment, and they're probably already tight in terms of storage in the boathouse. Singles take up a lot of room, and they cost a lot of money per seat for any program. So I would think going with a Cox quad to start with would be the way to go, and then doing these sorts of drills would be helpful as well.
The same person said they're in the Mid-Atlantic, but an interesting follow-up question: how would you say that region influenced club development?
Yeah, really interesting question, and it's been interesting to see where the top sculling programs are located. We have them spread out throughout the country, but the folks in California and Florida can row more year-round. They can and be in their boats longer. So I tend to think their skill level is generally a little bit higher. The northern crews are indoors a little bit more, so they have to do it more on fitness than technique. And in the northern crews, it's a little bit easier to do it with quads and doubles because of just safety concerns. We at the start of the year, one of the reasons athletes started coming down to sculling with dolphins is just because it was to get on the water in a single at the time we needed to get started wasn't safe on the Mississippi. We generally would start in quads and then work our way towards doubles. So that's where there's a real difference, where in the warmer climates, you can spend a lot more time in singles and feel that the athletes are safe in the boats. And then sort of follow up on that, because of that, then the seasons are a little bit different when the training takes place. And for primary instruction in the Quad Cities, for the real beginners, the best time is after youth nationals, in between youth nationals and club nationals. So we end up taking, or US nationals now, taking the rowers that learn at that time to the nationals or later on. That's the safest time to get athletes started in the northern climates. Yeah.
Dave points out that Sculler at Ease is still available online, in case anybody is wondering. Thanks, Dave.
I recommend it. Frank was unfortunately passed away not a little while ago, and the book is a beautiful book. There are some differences in different ideas about technique, but the overall approach to the book is really great.
Let's see here. A couple more questions for you. We have 4 more to go right now. What do you see that makes you go, oh, we got to do fill in the blank blade work? I feel like there's a lot of what, but not a whole lot of why at the moment. So what do you see? What are you looking for? What sort of things pop out to you where, Jamie, where you say, you know what, we've got to do this drill right now to fix that? Can you give us an example of that?
Let's see. I think the biggest thing that happens right now is skying at the catch. And it comes because of so much erging and trying to over compress at the front end. And so how to have athletes with the blades close to the water at the catch and be quick to the water to catch without too much loss of time. And that's the biggest challenge. And there are specific catch drills for that, you know, and easy ones are like stationary finished catch drills, you know, so those are more fix the problem drills. But if like the drills I just went through are more drills that if they're done well, you won't have that problem. Like as a package, like you do all these drills and then you shouldn't be having that problem. You're back to rowing on the water as opposed to sort of adapting right from the erg. But that's one that comes to mind.
Let's see here. You know, that reminds me, Jamie, do you happen to have any of these videos of you doing drills where you've captured it on video?
I do. Unfortunately, they're back in Washington, D.C. We're in the middle of moving to Boulder, and I unfortunately didn't bring the hard drive that they're on, but I can certainly, when we're back, put something together for that. So again, let me know if I can provide that, and I'll be happy to.
Brian asks a question here. Well, and you all have Jamie's email right there. So if you want to reach out to him and see if you can get specifically any of these drills, maybe he can help you out there. Brian asks, we're a hybrid sweep and sculling program. What best practice do you have to keep kids who want to exclusively cox engaged? And I'm going to guess that the answer is probably the cox squad, right? There's a U15-1 at Youth Nationals now. There's a U16-1 at Youth Nationals now, and the Charles has a cox squad as well. I don't know, Brian, where you're at and what region, but you know, those are right off the top of my head. Jamie, do you have any other ideas?
Yeah, have the cox and row.
Yeah,
have them learn, him or her learn how to scull, and they'll become a better coxswain.
No doubt. Let's see. Here's hey Connor. Being a Boston school, it's hard to feel safe doing these types of drills and freedom to flip without blocking a very crowded river. Because of this, we've saved most of our sculling, especially novice sculling, to the summer. Is there any advice to help novices to grow and play around with less room on the water other than buying a fleet of tubbies?
A fleet of?
A big tubby,
Right.
he wrote
Right.
tubbies, yeah.
Well, yes, that's a really good point that he's making. There are just places that are not conducive to this sort of primary level of instruction. And it's why we end up going down to Florida, to this one place. It's just safer to do it in the warmer weather, but it's necessary, or it's valuable, I should say. And so back home, then the only other time to do it is in the middle of the summer, when the rivers start slowing down a little bit, and people are out of school. They can come midday and there's not so much boat traffic. So in Boston, maybe the choice is to figure out some weekends to go to some lake that's not as busy, and do some of the drills there, and to supplement, because I've coached a little bit on the Charles. It's really hard to do any of this on the Charles, even doing like a big circle. It's such a busy waterway. So I really appreciate that. But I think it's valuable to find the time to go someplace where they're not afraid to fall in the water, and they make the association with water activities. I also think that it's really valuable for all young athletes to engage in other water activities. I know ADM is all about other sports. I'd like to see a little emphasis on other water sports. So there's a really well-known book in the 70s called Rudern, which was the East German book on rowing, and they had the stages of learning how to swim, learning how to dive, and then kayaking and canoeing in these Canadian or C1 canoes, and then starting to scull before going on to sweep rowing. We tend to think, oh, sculling first, then sweeping. But it turns out for the East Germans, it was actually swimming, diving, kayaking, canoeing, then sculling, and then sweep rowing. So that there were all these other water activities first, and the athletes learn how the paddles work, how they interact with the water. Like I said before, I'm a little jealous of the boat handling skills of kayakers and canoeists that I see, the sprint kayakers and canoeists that I see down in Florida that come from Canada. If we only get half of their skills in rowing shells, we would be such a better rowing country for boat handling and for blade work. And also the kayakers and the canoeists, they have this advantage where they have this direct connection between their hands and the shafts of the paddles that they use. We have this oarlock thing with the sleeve, which separates us from feeling directly the connection between the water and the blade. And that's why I spend time helping young athletes learn about how oarlocks and sleeves work. But the best thing for them is to actually hold a paddle and start learning how to use a paddle, and obviously swimming to start with.
There's a couple of things. Do you remember the book that you're talking about for the East Germans,
Rudern?
Jamie? Is it just Rudern? Is that the book you were talking?
Yep, Rudern, Rudern.
Yep. I also have a 2 years ago at this conference, or 3 years ago, we had the German junior national team coach present the whole German system and how they do it. I think, Jamie, you were there actually. If anybody wants that, I was just looking at his PowerPoint yesterday. So I don't have the video of him, but I have the PowerPoint. If anybody wants it, you can just write to me at chris.chase@usrowing.org. I'm happy to share what he does. Jamie, earlier on in the talk, you didn't get to see it, but in the chat, I put the link to basically the soft opening of the ADM website. And there's a lot of video in there about little kid drills and water sport that is not rowing, and all kinds of other activities. So that's in there. A couple more questions. Peter Wells, starts without hands. Can you paint a picture of what that looks like and how it's executed?
Sure. The boat's level. The blades are squared and buried. The handles are the blades are a little bit past perpendicular, so the handles are pointing a little bit towards the stern. Left handle over the right. The athletes lean gently to starboard to keep the handles pressed together. they sit patiently. It's calm conditions, hopefully. And then you say, attention, go. And their first reaction is to, or first movement is to reach for the oars. And they'll probably get them wide grip to start with. And then they'll take a stroke. And then they'll slide their hands to the ends of the handles, to the grips where they would expect to be. And if they do it well, all four athletes, say in a quad, all four athletes are in time. And there's just a little bit of extra patience by 3-seat, a little bit of extra patience by 2-seat, a little bit of extra patience by bow seat, so that they're all following stroke. Blades go in the water, then there's the pulling, there's not the swinging at the water, there's not a hurry, there's the connection made and the pushing away from the starting point. Yeah, and how's that for a picture?
Peter, how's that for a picture? And while Peter's thinking about that, we'll get on to, there's a couple more here. What countries outside the US do you think develop their scullers best and why?
Ireland. Dominic Casey does a fantastic job with the scullers. It's not technically the prettiest sculling. It's a little bit like us in that regard. No one's accused the White Quad Cities of rowing beautifully, but yeah, I'd like to think we're effective. Like in 2018, when we won Henley and set records on Saturday and Sunday, no one talked about it. They were talking more about the St. Paul's crew, and all credit to St. Paul's. They rowed beautifully, but we were pretty effective. So the Irish scullers are that way, and Fintan McCarthy and Donovan, Paul O'Donovan, unbelievable race in Japan, and especially considering the size of the country and that it's a local coach that took them there. Obviously, the Greek sculler that Johnny Pastiglione coached in Tokyo rowed beautifully, and the Greeks in general have been rowing very well. The country that historically has rowed well is Italy, and those are the countries that stand out in terms of technique right now. But sculling's interesting. You know, there are countries that are not the dominant countries that have emerged, and there can be a sculler from that country who does very well. And right now, as I said, Aurelia Maxima Jensen is doing great for Switzerland. We'll see how she goes on to the next level. And also, before we end, I'd like to give a shout out to Joe Harrison. He's done great work with his son Isaiah. I had a chance to room with Joe at Junior Worlds this year, and it's really exciting. He's done it. They've done it their own way. They live in a place that is far away from the regular rowing in the United States, and I'm looking forward to great things in the future for Joe and Isaiah.
Two more questions here. Are there any safety protocols you can share regarding sculling in later fall when it's darker earlier with sculling boats? And I can start with that. I would say, you know, lights are obviously the must, right? I think we can both agree on that, Jamie. Depending on the experience of the rower, pontoons are probably going to be really helpful if they're necessary, and proper clothing. All of our scullers here have to have life jackets under the footboards. I think you've really got to be careful as we get later in the fall or earlier even early spring. It gets very cold and the water's cold and the winds and what are equally as unpredictable. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, just that back into team boats, doubles and quads are much safer than singles. And there's a movie that just came out. Many of you might have seen it already. And there's a little bit of a stretch with regard to safety in the movie. Definitely don't go out when there's lightning. And if there's, we would not let people go out in the conditions that were portrayed in the movie.
I learned this summer, Jamie, that lightning, when it hits the water, can travel 20 miles. I always thought it was 8. That's 27 years into coaching rowing. I learned that lightning can travel 20 miles across water.
Wow.
So yeah, definitely have to revamp some safety protocols. Speaking of somebody who knows a lot about water safety, Thomas Rooks has a question here. But in terms of risk mitigation in water, I'll tell you what, Thomas Rooks worked for the Coast Guard for a long time. He's retired now, but knows a lot about it. His question is, with the elimination, reduction of youth lightweight events, we've moved towards sculling for our naturally smaller athletes and sweep rowing for our naturally bigger athletes. Do you see this as a good concept to make the sport more inclusive for various sized athletes?
I mean, he's not saying that there's going to be a weight restriction on sculling versus sweep, right? He's just saying that that's how they're approaching making their athletes competitive.
As I read it, that's how he's looking at giving the opportunity to lightweight athletes that are losing out on some of the opportunities that were there before.
Right, and so my response to that is, it seems, in terms of resources, having limited resources, that might be a really good approach. He should be encouraged, or his lightweight athletes should be encouraged by performances by lightweight scullers in the past. And I was fortunate enough to see Peter Henning compete at the Atlanta Games in 1996. Lightweight sculler from Great Britain, 3-time world champion, who became the openweight single sculler for Britain for that Olympics. And he took down a very tall, large Australian strong guy in the rep. And it was a remarkable feat for him to do that. Sculling levels the playing field much more than sweep does. And so lightweight athletes can be competitive. Andrew Campbell comes to mind as, it doesn't matter whether he was lightweight or openweight, he was just one of the fastest scullers. Steve Tucker from MIT, who was longtime lightweight sculler for the US, amazingly fast, won the openweight trials for the United States one year. So it seems like a good idea. Again, and the other thing is that in openweight events at the highest level, you will sometimes see athletes who are in sculling boats primarily, different size, that small athletes can make it in sculling maybe a little bit more easily than in sweep. So that seems like a reasonable thing to do with limited resources, to keep opportunities for these people. And the other part is, again, if they learn how to scull well, especially if they're learning how to row single, and they're, say, lightweights, and they want to be with a big competitive college or university program, that makes them that much more attractive to the Washingtons, the Yales, the Cals, the Harvards of the world, where you've got a real athletic coxswain who sculled competitively as a junior.
And not only that, one thing I would also say, Tom, is well, look at the Olympics this past summer, right? I mean, who won the single? Former lightweight, right? But I understand what you're saying, but I would also make sure that your heavier athletes, your bigger framed athletes are also sculling, because it's only going to make them better athletes. Well, handing out the awards this past June at Youth Nationals, you know where all the lightweights are going? The straight four. Of the 3 boats that medaled for the boys and the girls, the vast majority of the athletes that were collecting the medals were lightweights. Out of the 3 winning boats for each, medal winning boats for each gender.
Right.
That was interesting to see.
Right, and Chris, they could be maybe competitive in the pair as well. If you get the right sized hull for them, and there's the emphasis on, a little bit more emphasis on skill rather than brute power, the pair could work for them as well.
Well, Jamie, I think you were with me in Rachiche. That boat that won silver, the bow and the stroke were both lightweights.
Correct.
And the Cox 4, no less, of all that, the dead weight boats. Last question, Jamie. Do you recommend that novice juniors start with sculling or sweep? You go first.
Novice juniors, and do we have an age in mind?
They didn't say that. Novice in most places is around 9th grade, but if they want to, whomever, it was an anonymous question. Whoever wrote that, if you want to say age group, but let's presume that they're talking about the freshman age. That's the vast majority of entry levels in the country.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm a sculling coach. I think it's valuable for its own sake, and I think it's a valuable start to anyone's rowing career. I like to see it together with other water activities, and then moving into sweep as the athletes mature physically. That said, sweep rowing is still such a cool thing when they get to it. I mean, the speed of the boats, the camaraderie among the crews, the working with the coxswain, and that it forms friendships that are deep and lasting. So I wouldn't want to say, oh, scull first and then stay sculling the whole time. If they get a chance to do both and physically they can do it. One word I would say, though, one thing I would add to that is that just because you scull as a junior doesn't mean that you can row both sides as a sweep oars person. And sometimes coaches later on think, oh, because they can scull, they can row port or starboard, and they don't give the athletes time to adapt to one side or the other. And that's something to watch out for.
For what it's worth, I'll back up what you said, Jamie, but I'll even say further. You know, at our club, all middle school kids have to scull. They can't sweep. And then it's the same thing in England until they're around 15, 16. Our ninth graders can start sweeping in ninth grade, but we still, you know, make quads most of the time. I think for the longevity of their body at the time that they're experiencing their fastest growth development in their bodies, boys and girls, around 8th, 9th grade, the sculling is so much more better for them than twisting out to one side or the other and putting pressure on their spine and their backs. So I think there is a health component that, and I also think that the more that you scull at the younger ages, the better boat mover you're going to be later on. You have a better feel for the water, and you can still, you know, the smaller boat obviously gives you the feel, but you can still do the same thing you're talking about, culture and friendships in octuples and cock squads too.
No, that's
so
true.
And all you have to do is buy riggers for a boat you probably already have sitting on a rack. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great having you. If there are, well, hold on, we might have one more. Oh, hey, Kathy. Kathy says thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Well, it's great having you, Kathy. Kathy Kaufman from Virginia. Thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions, one last minute right there to take down Jamie's email. If you can write him an email first, rather than call him on his cell phone, that'd probably be a good place to start. But the phone calls and the phone numbers in case he doesn't write you back, right? Thanks a lot, Jamie. It's been a pleasure having you, and I look forward to seeing you when next I do.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much, everyone.
Say hi to Dee. Be safe, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow, and we'll start off fresh with Klezhnev in the morning.